Am I the a-hole for divorcing my wife after she had what she called a one-night stand during our separation, even though I later discovered it was much more than that? My wife and I were married for 14 years before everything fell apart. We did not meet in high school, unlike many of my friends and their wives, half of whom are now divorced anyway. We met at a friend's barbecue party some years after high school when we were both in our early 20s. My wife and I married 3 years after we met, both of us thinking we had found our perfect match. I started a custom furniture business many years ago, specializing in handcrafted pieces for restaurants and commercial spaces. It was a struggle to keep it going during the early years, and my wife worked as an administrative coordinator for a manufacturing company. Once my business became more successful and we felt financially stable, we discussed having children. Unfortunately, my wife had issues with endometriosis and severe complications that required extensive treatment. The doctor said if she did not undergo the procedures, she would be in constant pain and the condition would continue to worsen. She would have ongoing pelvic pain and complications that could become life-threatening. It was heartbreaking for both of us when we realized that having children was not going to be possible, but our relationship did not falter immediately after this news. She was depressed for several months because she could not have the family we had both wanted. As you can imagine, I did not love her any less because of her medical situation. Our relationship actually seemed to strengthen for a while. We did not have any major issues in the bedroom, and we made time for each other, despite my demanding business schedule. I always kept our date nights sacred, no matter how busy work became. I would cook for her some evenings, just trying to be romantic and show her that she was still my priority. Unfortunately for me, her behavior took a subtle shift over time, and I was not paying close enough attention to the warning signs. She would come home later from work, claiming that her supervisor was requiring more overtime from the administrative staff. She was a little bit more irritable than usual, snapping at me over small things that had never bothered her before. The affection between us was starting to fade in ways that I initially attributed to stress from her job. For example, when I cooked dinner for her one evening, she did not get home until almost 11 at night. She usually finished work at 5 in the afternoon, so this was a significant change from her normal routine. She did not tell me anything about working late, did not tell me she was with her coworkers grabbing drinks. She offered no explanation for the 6-hour gap between leaving work and coming home. I did not yell at her or accuse her of anything inappropriate. I simply told her it was not polite that she did not communicate with me about her whereabouts and did not respond when I reached out to her. Even after that incident, I did not pressure her for detailed explanations, but I did make a mental note of the behavior change. Fast forward a month, and I got a call from a friend who was out at a sports bar watching a game. He told me he saw my wife with several of her coworkers, but he also noticed my wife getting quite cozy with some guy. Before I could ask him if he was sure it was actually my wife, he sent me a photo on his phone. Sure enough, their faces were so close together that they could almost be kissing, and her body language was intimate. He told me that was how they had been interacting since he first noticed them at the bar. I did not question her about it when she got home later that night, claiming she had been out with female coworkers. As time went on, her behavior became increasingly more erratic and suspicious. A couple of times, she did not even come home overnight. Her location sharing showed she was at a female friend's apartment, and both she and her friend confirmed she was just too intoxicated to drive home safely. This friend lived with her elderly mother, so it seemed like a reasonable explanation for why she would crash there. But the frequency of these overnight stays was starting to seem excessive for someone who had never been much of a drinker. One evening, during what was supposed to be our weekly date night, I decided to address the situation directly. I asked her point blank if she was having an affair or involved with someone else. She looked at me like I was crazy and asked me why I would even suggest such a thing. The only thing I said to her was that her behavior had changed over the past few months. I did not tell her about the photo my friend had sent me because I wanted to hear what she would say without that evidence. She told me she loved me and would never do anything to destroy our marriage. She claimed that work stress was affecting her mood and that she needed time with friends to decompress. I did not ask her anything else about it that night, but I was not satisfied with her explanation. I had no concrete proof that she was doing anything inappropriate except for my friend's photograph and my observations. We did not have a dead bedroom, as so many couples struggling with infidelity report. Our physical relationship never dropped off drastically, but it did slow down noticeably over those months. She seemed less interested in intimacy and would often claim to be too tired or stressed for bedroom activities. Fast forward another month, and she did not come home for dinner without telling me where she was going. So instead of trying to reach out to her directly, I called her friend, whom she claimed to hang out with regularly. Well, I couldn't get in touch with that friend either, which seemed suspicious. I texted the friend's mother, who told me they had gone to a restaurant and then planned to visit a bar afterward. I decided to drive to the bar I suspected she would be at, and it turned out my instincts were correct. She was there with the same guy from the photo my friend had sent weeks earlier. Her female friend was also there, but she was with a different man and seemed to be on her own date. This was when I realized that these girls' nights out were actually double dates, not innocent friendship gatherings. I made the decision to confront her right there in the restaurant area of the establishment, rather than waiting until she came home. The confrontation at that restaurant was explosive and humiliating for both of us. When I approached their table, the guy she was with immediately stood up and got in my face. He started asking who I was and what my problem was, acting like he was ready to fight. I am 6'4" and he is 5'10". I got in his face and told him to back off. This was not his business, and he needed to step away before things escalated further. To my surprise, he backed off, but my wife went ballistic. She started yelling at me right there in front of other customers and staff, telling me I was not her father and demanding that I stop being controlling and possessive. I could tell she was drunk from the way she was slurring her words and swaying in her chair. Her face was flushed, and she was making a scene that everyone in the restaurant could hear. I told her we would discuss this situation at home like adults, but she refused to leave with me. She said she was staying exactly where she was and that I could not make her do anything. I looked at her for a long moment, realizing that the woman I married was gone. I said okay and walked away from the table, knowing that staying would only make things worse. Walking away was probably the best decision I could have made in that moment. I was furious and humiliated, but getting into a physical altercation would have solved nothing. My wife did not get home until almost 3 in the morning. I did not address her when she finally stumbled through the front door. I pretended to be asleep and listened to her crash around the house as she tried to get ready for bed. The next few hours before I left for work, I didn't say anything to her about what had happened. She acted like nothing unusual had occurred and went about her regular routine. But I knew our marriage was in serious trouble and I needed to understand my options. That day, I made an appointment to see a family law attorney to get an idea of what divorce would look like. The attorney asked me a series of financial questions about our assets, income, and debts. I told him she was an administrative coordinator who earned about $45,000 per year. I explained that I made almost 3 times what she made with my custom furniture business. He asked me what had brought me to his office, and I told him I suspected my wife was having an affair. When he asked if I had any proof she was being unfaithful, I showed him the photo my friend had sent. I also described what I had witnessed at the restaurant the night before. The attorney told me that what I had was not enough evidence to prove adultery in court. He explained that in our state, if I could provide concrete proof that my wife was cheating, I might not have to pay her alimony. This was news to me because I had assumed alimony was automatic when there was an income disparity, but he said adultery could be grounds for denying spousal support if I could document it properly. He also shared something interesting with me about the timing of any evidence I might gather. If I followed through with divorce proceedings, do not sleep with my wife once I had concrete proof she was cheating. If I continued to have relations with her after discovering infidelity, it might hurt my ability to avoid paying alimony. To be honest, I have never heard that before. The law, in some cases, views continued intimacy as a sign of forgiveness or acceptance of the affair. After that meeting, I went home to process everything the attorney had told me. The next few weeks were incredibly tense in our household. My wife seemed to sense that our marriage had changed after the restaurant incident. She was walking on eggshells around me, but she never brought up what had happened that night. She also seemed to be making an effort to come home at more reasonable times, but I knew this was probably just temporary behavior while she figured out how to better hide her activities. I began researching my options for gathering the evidence that the attorney had mentioned I would need. I initially did not want to hire a private investigator due to the expense. I looked into voice-activated recorders, but they would not be sufficient for proving physical infidelity. I researched GPS trackers, but those would only show locations, not prove what was happening at those places. I considered installing a dashboard camera in her car, but I thought she would notice it because of how large most of them were. Every option I researched had significant limitations for documenting the kind of evidence I needed. Meanwhile, my wife's behavior continued to be suspicious despite her apparent efforts to be more careful. She would still go out with her female friend, but now she would text me updates throughout the evening. These updates felt forced and artificial, like she was trying to create an alibi rather than genuinely keeping me informed. She would send messages saying things like having dinner now or moving to second location with timestamps. I just knew it was all BS. I also noticed that she had become much more protective of her phone than she had ever been before. She used to leave it lying around the house without a care, but now she carried it with her everywhere. After several weeks of observing her increasingly secretive behavior, I realized that I would not be able to gather the evidence I needed on my own. My only viable option was to hire a professional investigator who knew how to gather admissible evidence without breaking any laws. The investigator assured me that if my wife was having an affair, they would be able to document it within a few weeks of surveillance. I provided them with my wife's photo, work schedule, vehicle information, and the addresses of places she claimed to visit regularly. And I also gave the investigator a picture of her friend's address, and her friend's car. I knew this was a significant financial investment, but I also knew it was necessary to protect myself in the divorce proceedings. If my wife was cheating, I was going to have concrete proof of it, and if she was innocent, then at least I would know the truth and could decide how to move forward with our marriage. The private investigator started surveillance the following week, and within just 10 days, they had documented enough evidence to confirm my worst fears. My wife was indeed having an affair with the man I had confronted at the restaurant. The investigator provided me with photographs of her entering and leaving his house during work hours. They had time-stamped evidence of her car parked in his driveway for hours at a time while his wife was at her job. The pictures were clear and undeniable proof that she was lying about her whereabouts. But what really shocked me was learning that this had been going on for months, not just a few weeks. The investigator also discovered that she was in contact with a second man who lived in a neighboring town. She had been meeting him at various locations, claiming to be out with her female friend. The evidence was overwhelming, and I finally had the concrete proof that the attorney said I would need. Armed with this documentation, I made a decision that surprised even myself. Instead of immediately filing for divorce, I decided to confront my wife with the evidence and give her one chance to save our marriage. Part of me still loved the woman I had married 14 years earlier, and I wanted to see if she was willing to fight for us. I waited until an evening when she was home and asked her to sit down for a serious conversation. I laid out all of the photographic evidence on the coffee table in front of her, pictures of her car at his house, timestamps showing when she arrived and left, and photos of her entering and exiting the building. The look on her face when she saw the evidence was a mixture of shock, fear, and resignation. She broke down crying and admitted that she had been having an affair for several months. She claimed that she had fallen into it because she felt neglected and unappreciated in our marriage. She said that my focus on building my business had left her feeling lonely and had led her to seek attention elsewhere. I told her that while I understood she might have felt neglected, cheating was not the solution to our marital problems. If she were willing to end the affair immediately and commit to marriage counseling, I would consider trying to work things out. She promised me that she would cut off all contact with both men and do whatever it took to rebuild our relationship. We agreed to a trial separation to give both of us time to think about what we wanted. She moved in with her parents temporarily while we attended couples counseling and worked on our issues. For about 2 months, things seemed to be improving between us. She was going to individual therapy to address her issues, and we were making progress in couples counseling. We would meet for dinner once a week to talk about our feelings and what we wanted for our future. I was cautiously optimistic that we might be able to rebuild our marriage with professional help and commitment from both of us. The counselor had explained that recovering from infidelity was a long process that required complete honesty and transparency. My wife seemed to be following through on her promises to be open about her whereabouts and activities. She would check in with me regularly and provide details about what she was doing and where she was going. However, something unexpected happened that shattered any hope I had for reconciliation. During our separation, while we were supposedly working on rebuilding trust, she had what she called a one-night stand. She told me about it during one of our counseling sessions, claiming that she had too much to drink and made a terrible mistake. According to her story, she had gone out with some coworkers after a company event and ended up going home with a man she barely knew. She said it meant nothing to her and that she regretted it immediately afterward. She claimed she was telling me about it because the counselor had emphasized the importance of complete honesty, but I could not get past the fact that she had been unfaithful again while we were supposedly working on our marriage. This was not something that happened before our separation when she felt neglected or unappreciated. This happened after she had promised to be faithful and committed to rebuilding our relationship. The counselor tried to frame it as a setback rather than a complete failure, but I was done. I had given her a second chance after discovering months of deception and lies. I had agreed to separation and counseling instead of immediately filing for divorce, and she had repaid that trust by sleeping with another random man. I told her that our marriage was over and that I would be filing for divorce immediately. She begged me to reconsider, saying that it was just one mistake and that she was committed to our marriage. But I could not trust someone who had now cheated on me with 3 different men in less than a year. The pattern was evident, and I was not going to spend the rest of my life wondering who she was sleeping with next. I contacted my attorney and instructed him to proceed with divorce papers based on the original evidence of adultery. The documentation from the private investigator was still valid and would protect me from having to pay alimony. At least, that's what I had hoped for. My wife moved out of her parents' house and found her own apartment while the divorce proceedings moved forward. She continued to try to contact me, but I maintained no contact except through our attorneys. The divorce was finalized within 9 months, and she received no spousal support due to the adultery evidence. We had to sell our rental property and split the proceeds, but that was the only significant asset we had to divide. Looking back, I believe I made the right decision to end the marriage when I did. Some people in our social circle think I was too harsh and should have given her more chances to prove herself. They argue that the one-night stand during our separation was different from the ongoing affair and that people make mistakes, but I disagree with that perspective entirely. If someone cheats on you once, that shows poor judgment and weak boundaries. If they cheat again while you are trying to reconcile, that shows a fundamental lack of respect for the marriage. I was not willing to spend years in counseling, hoping that my wife would eventually become trustworthy. She had already proven multiple times that she was capable of lying to my face while maintaining intimate relationships with other men. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for divorcing my wife after she had a one-night stand during our separation? Well, I don't think so, but I am curious to know what others would do in a similar situation. Well, as the narrator, I have said many times, not every man will think the same. Some men will find their self-respect sooner than others. In this case, his agreeing to a trial separation after getting evidence from the private investigator of his wife's infidelity with two men was a complete waste of time. He should have just filed for divorce and buried this relationship until next time.